Imagine a love story so perfect that everyone thought it would last forever. Smiles in every picture, laughter echoing through every memory, and promises whispered in the dark. But behind closed doors, love has a way of showing its cracks. And sometimes, those cracks don't just break hearts, they end up breaking lives inside a courtroom. What you're about to hear is not just about romance gone wrong, but about betrayal, hidden truths, and the heavy cost of pride. Stay with me, because this is where love turns into courtroom drama. And before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories like this, delivered daily. At first, it seemed unshakable. They were the kind of couple people envied, the ones who held hands in public, who smiled knowingly at each other across the room, who seemed immune to the storms that swallowed other relationships. Friends said, if they can't make it, no one can. But what people didn't see was the quiet arguments, the growing distance, the unspoken words that piled higher and higher until they formed walls no love could climb. It started small, late nights at the office, unanswered messages, excuses that didn't quite add up. She began to wonder, who is he really texting? Why does his smile fade when I walk into the room? And he, feeling the pressure of expectations, started resenting the very person who once felt like his safe place. Love wasn't gone yet, but it was changing, and not for the better. When suspicions turn into accusations, words cut deeper than knives. You don't trust me, he said. You're hiding something, she shot back. Every fight left scars, invisible but permanent. And then one night, the truth surfaced in a way neither of them could deny. A hidden affair, a betrayal so sharp, it shattered the foundation of everything they had built together. But betrayal doesn't just hurt, it transforms. The woman who once cried quietly in the dark was now filled with fury, and the man who thought he could control the story realized too late that the courtroom doesn't care about smiles in photographs. It only cares about facts, evidence, and truth. The love that once brought them together now dragged them into a bitter courtroom, where promises became weapons and secrets became ammunition. She wasn't just fighting for dignity, she was fighting for justice. And as the doors of the courtroom opened, the world saw a new battle begin. A war not of love, but of pride, betrayal, and survival. And this is only the beginning, because once the first accusation is spoken in court, the story takes on a life of its own. And the people who once loved each other now become enemies, fighting not just for truth, but for everything they believe they deserve. The courtroom was tense, every eye fixed on the couple who once seemed unbreakable. He sat there in silence, trying to mask his nerves with a calm expression, but his clenched fists gave him away. She, on the other hand, carried a fire in her eyes, a fire born not just of betrayal, but of a determination to finally be heard. The lawyers wasted no time. Evidence was laid bare for everyone to see. Text messages, hotel receipts, late-night calls that could no longer be explained away. Each piece of evidence was like a hammer, striking the glass of his carefully constructed image. The man who once appeared successful, loyal, and untouchable now looked cornered, small, and vulnerable. But this wasn't just about infidelity, it was about money, power, and the empire they had built together. For years, she had been his silent supporter, the one behind the scenes, making sacrifices so he could chase his ambitions. Now, standing in front of the court, she made it clear. She wouldn't stay silent anymore. The arguments grew heated. His lawyer painted her as vindictive, a woman scorned who only wanted revenge. But her lawyer fought back with calm precision, reminding the court of the promises he made, the trust he broke, and the life she lost because of his choices. Every word hit hard. Every fact exposed the cracks he thought he had hidden. And as the trial moved forward, something became clear. This was no longer just a fight about betrayal. It was about justice. She wanted the truth acknowledged, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been deceived by the image of a perfect couple. People in the courtroom whispered to each other, shocked by each new revelation. Friends who once admired him now avoided his gaze. Business partners who once trusted him began to doubt. His entire reputation, built over years, was unraveling in just a few days of testimony. But even as his empire trembled, he refused to accept defeat. He leaned on his lawyer, whispering strategies, demanding control, believing he could still turn the tide. Yet what he didn't realize was that the more he tried to manipulate the story, the more obvious his desperation became. And there she sat, calm, resolute, no longer the woman who once begged for his love. Now she was the one in control, using truth as her weapon. The courtroom wasn't just a place of law anymore. It had become the battleground where their love story would finally die, replaced by something far darker, far more permanent. But the real shock was yet to come, because hidden deep in the legal documents, buried in the fine print of contracts they had both signed long ago, there was one clause, one overlooked sentence, that had the power to change everything. Neither of them knew it yet, but when that clause surfaced, the courtroom drama would shift in a way no one could have predicted. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the judge sifted through the mountain of documents stacked high on his bench. At first, it seemed like routine paperwork, agreements, contracts, settlements, nothing extraordinary. But then his expression changed. He paused, leaned forward, and adjusted his glasses. The silence in the room grew heavy. Something had caught his attention. It was a clause, buried deep in the prenuptial agreement they had both signed years ago. A single line, overlooked for years, written in plain legal language, but carrying the weight of a bombshell. The judge's voice cut through the air as he read it aloud, and in that moment, the room shifted. The clause stated that in the event of proven infidelity, the guilty party would forfeit not just half of their assets, but control over every joint business venture, every shared property, every investment tied to the marriage. The color drained from his face. He had spent years building a fortune, spreading his wealth across companies, properties, and offshore accounts, believing he had secured it all beyond reach. But now, because of that one forgotten clause, his empire was in jeopardy. Everything he had worked for, every deal he had closed, every empire brick he had laid, could crumble with a single judgment. She sat there, stunned but steady. She hadn't remembered the clause either, but hearing it now felt like justice she never imagined possible. The courtroom erupted in whispers, reporters scribbling furiously, lawyers flipping pages to confirm the judge's discovery. His lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but no amount of strategy could erase what was written in black and white. The judge's tone was firm, impartial, but unshakable. The law was clear. The evidence of betrayal was undeniable, and the clause left no room for interpretation. He would lose far more than he ever feared. The man who once walked into that courtroom confident, believing money and power could bend the truth, now looked broken. His hands trembled as he buried his face in them. Realizing the cost of his arrogance, he had gambled with love, betrayed the one person who had stood by him, and now the price was his empire. The irony was cruel. The same document he had once insisted she signed to protect himself had become the very weapon that destroyed him. And as the session ended for the day, the weight of the revelation lingered. She walked out of the courtroom not victorious, not triumphant, but liberated. The truth was no longer a burden she carried. It was out in the open, undeniable, irreversible. But the trial wasn't over yet. The final judgment still awaited, and with millions, reputations, and futures at stake, the next session would decide how much of his world he would lose. The city watched with bated breath, wondering, could a man so powerful truly lose everything over a single hidden clause? The final day of the trial arrived with the kind of tension you could almost touch. The courtroom was overflowing. Reporters, onlookers, even rival businessmen, eager to witness the downfall of a man once thought untouchable. Cameras clicked outside, broadcasting every flicker of expression as he entered, pale and drained, a shadow of his former self. She followed shortly after, calm but unyielding, as if every step carried the weight of the years she had endured. When the judge entered, the room hushed instantly. He carried in his hands the ruling that would decide not just the case, but the future of two lives and the empire that had once looked indestructible. His voice was measured, but the words fell like thunder. The hidden clause was binding. The evidence of betrayal was clear, and the verdict was final. She was awarded full control of their joint properties, significant shares in their businesses, and custody over assets he had spent a lifetime trying to protect. For him, it wasn't just a financial blow, it was a public dismantling of everything he had built. The very foundations of his power had been stripped away in one morning. Gasps filled the room as the ruling sank in. For years, people had whispered about his invincibility, how his money and influence shielded him from consequences. But today, justice had proven stronger than power. He sat there, hollow, staring at the papers in disbelief, while she, though emotional, held her composure. She hadn't just won a case. She had reclaimed her dignity, her life, and her voice. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, some cheering her resilience, others stunned at the scale of his downfall. The story became headlines across the nation. The empire destroyed by a single hidden clause. It was no longer just a courtroom drama. It was a lesson carved into history. And the lesson was clear. Arrogance blinds, betrayal costs, and the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply buried. What began as love ended as a battle, and the very weapons he once forged to protect himself became the blades that cut him down. As the cameras rolled and the world watched, she gave a single statement. Sometimes justice doesn't come when you want it. But it always comes. Her words echoed beyond the courthouse walls, striking at the heart of everyone who had ever doubted that truth prevails. This was more than the end of a marriage. It was the end of an illusion, the unraveling of a man who thought he could outrun consequences. And for those watching,